Good morning, everyone, once again. I hope you've seen quite a bit of what Uttarakhand can offer in the presentation that was just, which just happened, and in the honorable words of our Tourism Minister, Sri Satpal Maharaj ji. He outlined what all Uttarakhand can offer. Now here I have with me a panel who are working on different aspects of tourism when it comes to Uttarakhand. And one common thread that binds them all is that they're involving the local community also and empowering them when it comes to tourism in Uttarakhand. So I would like to actually start with, and this is the whole community-led model, how locals are being empowered to cater to tourism. I'd like to start with Manisha, who runs Village Ways, and just to ask her how they are going about empowering the local community to be an active part of tourism in Uttarakhand. Manisha.
Thank you for the question, and first of all, it is a great pride and honor to be here. Second time by the Indian Express, and the first time I was also in Meghalaya. So thank you for the opportunity, and also to Uttarakhand Tourism. With Village Ways, we set up an organization in 2005, and the concept was, we call it adventure, but we also say that we introduce something called walking holidays rather than trekking. And by that we meant that how people don't need to make a holiday just to reach from point A to point B. Because between the A and B, there are many different cultural aspects, there are many communities living within those areas, and it can't be that we bypass those communities and talk about tourism, because they are at the center of all this. And certainly the whole concept emerged around that. And we were set up initially to help 5 villages inside a very difficult area. When I say difficult, though it's very pristine and beautiful, it's a sanctuary. It's called Binsar. But they were facing so many difficulties because of lack of livelihood. And therefore, Village Ways was originally set up to stop the out-migration from these 5 villages of Binsar. And instead of focusing on independent stays, like homestays, which we generally call, we focused on building up community guest houses, which were not only run by the local communities, but also owned by the communities, so that you could secure their ownership of their lands, which is also quite a difficult thing in the hills when they lose their ownership. And on the basis of that, we formed some excellent experiences for people to come and not only just walk from village to village, but could also stay with the communities and have those interactions which then lead to them coming back. So you will be surprised that in our Almora or Bageshwar district villages, we have had guests who have maybe even come 7 times or 8 times to the same village, and it's not, I'm telling you, it's not just because of the places, it's also because of the people. So our whole work is around community ownership, community not being fragmented to run a tourism being low-key so that there is not over-tourism. They just have tourism enough to have an additional livelihood source.
Right, I'll come back to that. About over-tourism is something that we should also talk about. But I'd like to bring Mr. Lokesh Ohri in here. You are the founder of Humanities, Himalaya, and you have this program called Been There, Doon That. If you could just throw some light about how you are involving the local community in your
Yeah, so we take up villages, we look at villages, and in some ways we are doing exactly the same work that Village Ways is doing. But a very significant part of our work is also about training the village community to run walking trails, to curate experiences. So when we talk to tourists, I think now tourism is an outdated term. And I think travel and experience is more significant to discerning travelers. So when we reach out to the market, we try to convince people that if you're coming here to Uttarakhand to enjoy your holiday, and you are trying to enjoy your holiday at the same pace at which you live in a big city, then you will not go back relaxed. You will not feel that you've had a holiday. What most people are doing in our hill stations these days is that they are coming here, they are, ticking the boxes that हमने ये देख लिया, ये देख लिया, ये देख लिया, 5 दिन का tour किया, and you get back to your home. You've done it at the same pace at which you live in the city, so you don't feel relaxed when you return home. So what we are trying to tell people is that please slow down. If you are in Uttarakhand, this is the slow life. Experience the slow life. If you slow down, you will go back truly relaxed. And we are training villages to give that kind of experience, to curate that kind of experience through food, through the walking trails. So we don't do grand stuff, like we don't do too much adventure, but we just do a tree trail. That look at the trees, talk about the trees. And locals can share their experiences about trees. They can share their experiences about birds, about food, about the water systems, the nalas, and how they want to conserve the streams. So it's a very, very intimate experience, very slow experience, and because of which I think a lot of the tourists, they also go back very relaxed. A lot of the travelers, they go back with a great experience. And they go back with an experience where they have truly experienced Uttarakhand. Because Uttarakhand is it's a destination, it's a place where you cannot separate nature from culture. You cannot separate spirituality from the landscape. Wellness. So all that is part of the landscape of Uttarakhand, and all these are elements which need to be a part of a tour or a trip that a person takes through Uttarakhand.
Right, and I think this is very important, especially to involve the community, because otherwise we see a lot of the local community now migrating to the city in search of jobs, and which is what has left a lot of villages empty of the younger population who've all migrated to the city. But doing this, we can...
I think the touchstone of any community program or any program that relates to tourism has to be that what is it giving back to the community. So investment is fine, big hotels, resorts, they're all fine. They are coming here, they are investing. But the crux of the whole thing is that the community should retain control over the landscape.
Right.
And they should get employment out of it. They should not be forced to move out so that a resort builder can build a resort in their landscape.
Right. I'd like to bring in Mr. Mahesh, Aurora here. Now, you run something called the Goat Villages and Bakri Chhap, right? So if you can just highlight what you do, and then we will take the discussion forward.
Absolutely. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here. When I started working in the realm of tourism, Uttarakhand became my Karam Bhumi, and recently we ventured into Arunachal Pradesh, which is in the northeast of India. And this conference feels like a beautiful sangam of the eastern and western Himalayas. So coming to your question, Roshun, although what we do at Impact Investors and what we have done so far at the Goat Villages, at a broader level, we are using tourism as a prop to solve certain social and ecological issues. So if I were to zoom into tourism for all of us here, what we do at tourism, within the realm of tourism, is to use tourism to A, solve, as I said, a particular problem in the region, in the operating region. B, create an experience for a tourist which no longer is available by default. What I mean by that is, in the cities with the kind of development and lifestyles that we have in today's era, we've become a very emotionally bankrupt society. We are financially abundant, in a materialistic sense also we're abundant, but emotionally we're all bankrupt. We don't get the same nani and dadi ke ghar ka experience which we used to get decades ago. So when you still go to a very remote village in Uttarakhand or Himachal or Jammu Kashmir or the northeast of India, a place which is still untouched by modernization and industrialization, what you get is exactly that. Somebody will invite you कि आके बेटा चूल्हे की चाय पियो ना या मंडुए की रोटी खाओ ना. ये जो ऑलरेडी चल रहा है उनके लाइफस्टाइल में, उसका अनुभव करो ना. So how, without disrupting the organic experience that is emerging, how can you make it commercial? So it's a very sensitive, intersection. You want to make it commercial, and yet you don't want to make it commercial. You want the sentiment to be conveyed. And also, you want the whole lifestyle that is there in terms of ecological sustainability to be there. You don't want your guests to bring kurkure ke packets or all the plastic and all the noise that we bring from the cities. So a lot in the realm of policy design. How do you implement responsible tourism? How do you make a villager who was very comfortable living like a villager, but suddenly he or she's a homestay host, comfortable in conveying कि हमारे यहाँ पे ये allowed नहीं है. All of that.
Right. No, and you raised a very important point about responsible tourism and this whole thing about plastic pollution which comes with overload of tourists coming.
Sorry to shame a few companies.
Yes. So in fact, that is something that when we talk about developing tourism in states like Uttarakhand, where we have a very fragile ecosystem, right? And we are seeing the effects of over-tourism happening in states like Uttarakhand. Yes, part of it is infrastructure development, but because of the rapid infrastructure development, you're also affecting the environment. We are seeing increasing landslides, increasing flash floods. The glaciers, which used to be there, have now receded quite a bit, and the snow melt is happening earlier. So how do you think the government can probably bring in a policy to encourage responsible tourism? Manisha, I'd like to start with you.
Yeah, I think, first of all, because this is a very big subject, everywhere right now, not even just in India, but in the perspective of the world where you see mass tourism becoming a huge problem. And honestly speaking, there's no straightforward answer to this. But I think what can play a critical role is also over-dependence on tourism, because I think the whole economy of a state, if it's over-dependent on tourism, then it will be very hard for us to even give lectures to local communities about over-tourism, because frankly, they are totally dependent on it. And whenever, if you ask the local people about what livelihood source they have, I'm sure everybody will agree that Uttarakhand, by and large, is more or less dependent on tourism. So the fact is that how much the local communities can encash with that is actually quite sad, because they are actually at the lowest stage where they are able to get the minimum impact from tourism, despite being the most impacted by the worst impacts of tourism, which comes actually finally on the local people. So the fact is that there are two ways to look at this. One is, of course, policies at the level of course, what kind of areas can have a permit system. There are many regions which we are trying to separate out in terms of wildlife, national parks, which still have some kind of, activity prohibitions because of the passes. But having said that, the other general areas, even the access from roads, now being more convenient, actually are creating more havoc, because people are actually bringing vehicles from long distances to travel to Uttarakhand, not using public transport, not using trains. So I think the answer is also how you can filter by providing certain kind of parameters in the services being offered. There is, for example, I'll just give a small example. In our own villages, none of them are motorable. So you actually have to walk and reach there. So that sort of cuts couple of, audience who may not want to walk and come there. This is a very brief example, but then you need to differentiate between regions which are very sensitive. And I think the government's role can be of also reducing the dependence overall on tourism, which could, I think, help. Because once you are dependent, you really can't talk about conservation, and it doesn't make sense, because it's all related to the economy.
Right. Of course, आप लोग बैठ जाइए ना अब इतना
आप लोग बैठ जाइए प्लीज
कंफर्टेबल हो जाए
लगी हुई है बैठिए ना
in fact you at the end of the day, like you were mentioning, it comes down to income generation. Which is the highest level of income generation in Uttarakhand right now? It is tourism, related to tourism, right? Now, if you have to make a bridge between tourism and conserving the environment at the same time, because like I said earlier, we have a very fragile ecosystem here, with the forests and the glaciers and the rivers. How do we bring in that kind of responsible tourism, Lokesh?
So yeah, I hope the Honorable Minister was sitting here.
This is being live broadcast, so he will
okay.
he'll hear it.
So when I look at Uttarakhand and I travel through the state, I see that we have opened up the state in all ways possible to different modes of transport. So we have these big expressways and highways. We have a rail line which is going all the way to Karnaprayag. Huge tunnels are being built for that. We have helicopters zipping everywhere. So air, road, rail, and now ropeways also. We are trying to open up the state in every way possible to every mode of transport. And one assumes that this is going to invite huge crowds. So I think I would urge the government to slow down a little bit on this, because Uttarakhand as an experience is only good if you have what we describe as slow tourism. That if you slow down, if you reduce the pace of your travel, you spend more time in the state. Like if you go to a village, if you spend 4 days, only then you begin to understand where you are. If you come from Gurgaon or Mumbai or wherever. So, what we are trying to do is we are trying to increase the pace of the holiday, which is always a bad strategy in terms of business as well. The idea is to have people here to spend more time, to do it slowly. And as ma'am also said that people are driving all the way from Tamil Nadu and Maharashtra and places like that. Earlier you saw only Haryana, Delhi cars, but now you see cars from everywhere, going to every destination. We have good roads, but we need to understand the carrying capacity of every destination, and we need to limit the number of tourists who can go there. So even in terms of the community, I think that we don't need to overwhelm the community. If we overwhelm the community, then they also become bad hosts. So I think striking this balance is very, very important if we want tourism to remain the engine of growth in Uttarakhand in the coming years.
Right. Mahesh, I wanted to just bring you in. You also run a similar program, you said, in Arunachal as well. Do you see some sort of learnings from there that can be implemented in Uttarakhand in terms of responsible tourism here?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Arunachal for us is relatively new, and in terms of learnings, I love that the roads are not great there. That creates a very natural filter for large volumes of tourists to enter the space, and yet all these destinations where we operate in Arunachal attract just the sweet number of tourists which the destination can handle, the carrying capacity which Lokesh was just mentioning about. So roads are not that great, which I look at as advantage. I don't think we need much more development than that. It serves the needs of the locals. They can reach the hospitals or any other important facilities. The tourists can get there. And Arunachal has retained its rustic charm in terms of traditional architecture, how they still take pride in speaking their own language. Their agriculture and animal husbandry is still a large part of their daily life, and that is very well shared with the tourists who come there. So even though Arunachal has been attracting a lot of tourists in the last 2 to 3 decades, they've not lost it all at a pace at which we are losing in Uttarakhand, in my opinion.
Right. In fact, I wanted to also, bring in a couple of questions from the audience also later. So if you have any questions, you can put your hand up, and we will take the question. Before that, I just wanted to come back to, sustainable tourism. I think one of the big problems with a lot of tourism happening is the amount of waste that we generate. and the waste disposal mechanisms that we have right now are not conducive enough. What do you think can be done to have an efficient waste disposal mechanism that is sustainable and environment friendly? We'll come in reverse order here.
Sure. Number one, policies and implementation on reduce. There's no other way. We don't have, as a country, as a nation, we don't have great mechanisms when it comes to recycling the waste. And if you really dive deep into how the waste ecosystem operates in our country, we had been buying waste from other countries, right? So we don't have enough mechanisms to handle our own waste. So we need very strict policies around reducing the amount of waste that gets into these destinations, especially with tourism. And important checks, for example, at the goat villages, we had this very interesting policy where before the guest arrives, we give them a written policy which includes that please do not bring any non-biodegradable waste to this location. We are at an altitude of 7,500 feet. There's no road. We don't have municipality coming in. So there's no way for us to manage that waste except from burning it, which is not great for the air quality. So some people read it, some people don't. And even if somebody ends up bringing the waste, during the checkout, we do a very soft, warm checking of the room. And we gently encourage them to take it back, even if it's a small wrapper of a candy. We encourage them to take it back and dispose it off in the cities, which people have appreciated over all these years. So I think what we also need is a bit of policing when it comes to waste management.
Yes. Lokesh, how are you handling it in the village tours that you all do? Because there again, you will have a lot of waste generation when you have tourists coming.
Yeah, so a large part of the work that we do is also centered around developing a community of travelers. So when we have this community of travelers over the social media, over the various ways in which we connect with them, we have these discussions very often. We talk about plastic waste, we talk about non-biodegradable stuff and how our streams, our rivers, our fields are littered with plastic. So a lot of the visitors that we get as part of our tours are already sensitized to the idea that they should not generate any plastic waste. And they try to minimize, like to the extent of carrying their own plates, carrying their own mugs, so that the community or the roadside tea vendor does not have to serve them tea in a disposable glass. So one aspect of this is sensitizing the visitor, because village communities themselves, you can sensitize them, you can teach them, educate them to a certain extent. Beyond that, they are helpless. If, in Uttarakhand and in many parts of India, we also have this attitude of Atithi Devo Bhava. So whatever the guest does, we accept it, and therefore people don't point out when someone throws trash. So sensitizing the traveler and only ensuring that those kinds of travelers arrive at the destinations we are working with is a significant part of the work that we are trying to do. But I think this needs to be taken up on a large scale. Like I live in Dehradun, and a lot of tourists come to Dehradun and they go to the KFC or they go to McDonald's and they buy stuff. And by the time they're finished eating, they're already driving up into the sal forests of Mussoorie. And they just wind down the window and throw out the trash in the forest. So I think these vendors also who are giving out all this stuff in terms of plastic packaging and they need to have signage at their stores. And government needs to ensure that you are entering Uttarakhand, you are entering Devbhoomi, this is not a dustbin. This is not a trash bin. You can't throw trash wherever you feel like. So many times we pick up fights with people who are, driving in their cars on the highways and they are just throwing out trash onto the hillsides. So I think it needs to be managed in many, many multi-pronged ways. And from our side, we are trying to educate the visitor. We are trying to educate the traveler. But our reach is very limited. I think government needs to step in to run a very, very strong campaign saying that Uttarakhand is Devbhoomi and it is not a trash bin.
Right. And I think a lot of this is being done because I have gone on treks in Uttarakhand, Dayara, Bugyal and all that. And when you set off on the trek, you are equipped with a personal trash bag where you keep putting whatever you are using in that trash bag, and then you dispose it of responsibility at the end of the trek, right? In your village ways thing as well, how do you go about educating your tourists and your groups in this?
Yeah, I mean, as Lokesh ji said, that part of it is, of course, educating the travelers who are coming, because I think what we observed over the last 20 years, whether it's in India or even in Nepal, is that honestly speaking, mobilizing the local communities and villages is far easier than in the towns, because they take ownership of their area. And once you build a link between their environment, and with pride, that people are coming to see this, people are coming to see your village. I think that sense of pride, once it builds up, they generally keep their areas clean because it's also visited by outsiders. So I think once you link that pride into a community, by and large, I know it will be not as easy to do it in a larger scale, but that's something which we can build up, is a sense of pride in our regions, in our country, for example, in a broader way. In terms of the basics, as already Maniji and Lokesh have pointed out, the problem is not so much now in terms of collection of waste, because that's probably very organized still by the government. They are probably picking up the waste from designated places. But the bigger problem is that there is no system of disposal. I think most of it is only getting dumped. And unfortunately, we are seeing many forested areas which are actually getting dumped with this. So over a period of time, what we realized is to create minimum waste. How do you do that? So not providing any plastic water bottles in the villages, because we have huge numbers of guests coming in, and how do you reduce the overall plastic waste? Because there's no disposal system. I think collection is probably more organized than any methods of disposal, and that's something which government really needs to do now.
Yes, and unfortunately, and I don't want to mention which towns this is, but in Uttarakhand and neighboring Himachal also, I have seen local waste disposal vans collecting garbage, driving a few kilometers out of town and putting it down the hillside.
Exactly.
Unfortunately, that is a reality, and we need to somehow control that and check that. We have a couple of audience questions. This gentleman here, if you can get a mic to him, please, he can ask his question.
I think one of the things that I wanted to ask is, there is adventure tourism and then there is adventure sports, right? And there is an overlap between the two. And a good example of that would be something like, Tour de France that happens. Now, Uttarakhand is probably as big as France itself, right? So you could actually have Uttarakhand's, Tour de Garhwal if you want, which is a cycling experience which is over multiple days, and, it draws the right kind of crowd. And that is the kind of crowd that you want. So, potentially, going back to your point about, we've opened up all these highways and ropeways and I don't know, other stairways, and we're just having hordes of people coming, but they have nothing really to do. And I think one of the ways we could channelize that energy is by getting the right kind of tourists, which is, how can we get more cyclists to come? How can we get some of these type of more channelized behavior? Because not often, so, for example, if you can actually host a tour the Garhwal, if you like, right?
Right.
And that happens over, let's say, a period of 2 months. Automatically people know, अरे वहाँ पे तो यार अभी वो cycling की वजह से ये बंद होगा, वो बंद होगा, ये होगा, वो होगा. And you channelize the right kind of people who come there, people who are interested in cycling. You might also even create a market for cycles and spare parts and repair.
Very interesting point.
Yeah.
So I think, ideas like that would probably help a lot more than trying to beat people up and saying, don't do this or don't do that.
Very interesting point that he makes.
I think
You would respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very important point also, because there's no segregation in terms of what markets we are drawing. So for example, I have seen various states positioning the whole state as a certain destination. then segregating the areas based on what can draw a particular type of audience. Unfortunately, we try to focus on volume. And when you focus on volume, there'll be no segregation of what type of tourist should come to which area. And therefore, the people who are coming for focused interest, they may deviate to some other region because they may not find it very interesting, because it's a huge mix of all kind of people coming with different interests, and there'll be a mismatch. So I think for the state, positioning of the state plus segregation of areas based on special interest would certainly make it more attractive and much more suitable for, as he said, that it will be very important, for example, cyclists to have some areas where probably they will not have party animals coming and creating huge sound. So I think that way the state also will need to work with the private industry players as well.
Right. Also, I think this helps bring income back to the community. You can have a local buying 10 cycles and renting it out as a cycling thing. It can become part of a larger group. Correct. Yes. So this is a very important point. Yeah, Lokesh.
So, yeah, I'm working on a project in a village called Munsiari with the community. So, Munsiari is the extreme end of Uttarakhand in the Kumaon region, and very close to the place called, the real capital of Uttarakhand. So what we are trying to do with the community is that we are trying to have this village of weavers and cholia dancers and artists. So basically what we are trying to do is to curate an artist's village and then draw a map of the entire trail that you can take. So basically if you approach Munsiari through Kumaon, you can visit the entire Kumaon and then exit out of the entire Garhwal. So it's a challenging trail, but it's a very fascinating trail, and we are doing it with Royal Enfield mainly for bike riders, but I think cyclists are also most welcome. So we are doing pit stops in between in some destinations, and then Munsiari is going to be our green pit stop, and then we will do homestays and other facilities on the way out of Garhwal. So this is, it gives you a 360-degree view of Uttarakhand if you want to do that trail. So we are actually working on that, but I'm not too sure how many people will take it once it's there.
Yeah.
I don't think it's predominantly it's one thing to have athleisure, right? But what I mean is actually making it professional, so that you start seeing that, the guys who are doing Tour de France actually see, for example, Tour de Garhwal as the mecca of cycling. You could take it to that level because, I've lived in Europe. Himalayas ke samne Alps to chota sa mole hai yaar, kuch nahi hai usme. I mean, these mountains are rugged, they're big, they're huge.
Yeah.
And the kind of exhilaration that they can get out of doing such activities here, whether it is trail running, cycling, and there are a lot of people who are into dirt biking, mountain biking. There are these sports that can draw the right kind of people, and therefore we can learn from how the Alps have been maintained. Because at the end of the day, I think if we can maintain the mountains, we'll maintain the region.
Right.
It's very simple, right?
True. One more question. Yeah. Mike here.
So continuing from my friend is coming through. My whole concept has been around the education of the travelers coming across. Why I feel this important is, like Lokesh has been talking about the Munsiari Trail and the Kumaon Trail. I know about this project from Royal Enfield. I've been involved in the similar kind of projects wherein the upper Himalayan trails can be exposed out to the people. See, my problem, or rather the question essentially arises that Uttarakhand has been a destination, or historically has been part of the motorsport history of India. One of the toughest rallies, the Himalayan rallies, ran through Uttarakhand in 80s, and till 88 it was a prominent thing. Later on to be taken over by Mr. Parmar in Himachal, and then the rally of Raid the Himalayas came in picture. To be honest, for my generation who was born in 80s and rather later part of 80s and 90s, none of us knew about it unless I met Roshun, and he spoke about it in his auto journalism days about it, and then I researched about it. So again, the education part of it is, I believe, has been missing from a lot of plans which a lot of governments have been making, and us as well as in terms of we being travelers have been missing out upon that. So it's kind of a responsibility probably which rests upon us as well in terms of educating people what is the responsible traveling and saving the trash and understand the cultural immersion. Like for example, I was just talking to Namgyalji and telling him that, okay, there is a dry toilet concept in Ladakh and there is a reason behind it. And overall, the culture has evolved around it.
Right.
Right? So we need to impart that kind of knowledge, and probably it's our duties to be there and help out. Any plans and any thoughts about it?
Interesting point. Just to add to what Hitesh is saying, the cultural angle, right? I mean, we have different types of tourists. So you have the adventure tourist who's coming in for the exhilaration of the sport. You have the leisurely tourist who's coming just to like kuch khayenge, piyenge, aram karenge, jayenge, that type, right? And then there are people who come to witness the local culture. They want, like we had a lovely performance with the music troupe, the dances, the foods, right, of Uttarakhand. How do we bring that angle in?
Yeah, I mean, I actually have a video of 1 minute to play for this, not just because I wanted to promote it, but because I want to showcase that between the adventure with the communities, there is a very important aspect of culture. And actually, it's the only thing which can ensure that a right type of traveler, because I do understand that education of travelers is very important, but I also feel that destination building in the right way is also equally important. You know, if you don't give the right choices to a consumer, the consumer has no choice but to choose whatever is available. So I think it's also the duty of all the operators, project developers to also set up those principles in tourism, where the communities are at the center and they can say no to a lot of things. Because in tourism, when you learn to say no, I think that's when the whole process starts to become more responsible. So I think the whole centering of the community is therefore very important. You know, in many states, the community has opposed tourism. In states like Kerala, I know that they have opposed tourism, mass tourism, and then the right kind of tourism has come into. Today they are positioned as a responsible state, not just because of the policies, but because the communities are taking the ownership of the tourism. So if possible, I'd just like to play a 1 minute video which I had shared with them if they can.
Do we have the video? Can we play it?
It's not about just visiting a place or visiting, seeing wildlife. It's about the communities at the center. I think that probably is the first step towards making it more responsible.
Yeah. Yes, look.
Yeah, for me, it's a very bold question, actually, and it encourages me to answer in an equally bold and unfiltered way. And I can actually build on what Manisha just shared with us. So when we look at culture being part of tourism and community integration, I want to question everyone in the room that are we really talking about using locals as a cultural prop? Or are we really talking about a full integration where there are stakeholders in the business? So this video was very rich, which we just played, Manisha, thanks for that. And when we're going into these destinations and looking at the community just as a prop, as someone or something we can get a nice picture clicked with for our Instagram or Snapchat, or do we really feel invited into their homes, into their lifestyles, into whatsoever they're doing, and we don't mind roughing it out for a day or a night or we don't mind getting our hands dirty in the soil. That is what brings a shift in the perspective for the tourists. And for me, through the lens of my experience, that is transformational.
Right. Yeah. Lokesh, you want to add to that?
So, when, the tourists need these destinations and they need these communities, and vice versa for the community as well. They need the tourists. So this is a kind of contract between the tourist and the community. And, it's important to sensitize both. Like for riders, as you pointed out. So we do a program where we take a group of riders, because I am an anthropologist myself, so whenever a festival is about to happen, what we do is we sit down with these riders and give them a basic orientation, that you travel to this area where the festival is happening, but also document the festival for us. So a lot of the Royal Enfield riders, what they are doing now is that they are documenting these traditions. And so automatically you are connected with the space, you are connected with the ritual, you are connected with whatever is happening. And if you have a little bit orientation, you are also asking the right questions. So I think that also gives the community a sense of pride that these are not just travelers who are spending money and giving us employment, but they're also interested in what we are doing. So I think this can work both ways between the community and the traveler.
Right, and that brings us back to education. I had one more question from a gentleman behind. Yes, can we get a mic to him, please?
Good morning. Thank you for your insights on responsible tourism, which, as we know, is becoming an international problem as well. In the video as well, in some of the conversations, we spoke about the discerning traveler, people who are looking for slow tourism and so on. Within Uttarakhand and in other parts of India, we see international travelers driving that segment a bit more. I was curious if in your organizations there is any aspect of an international outreach or any particular marketing efforts targeted specifically at travelers outside India and bringing them to Uttarakhand.
Yeah. Manisha?
Yes, so for us, I think we have done very specific marketing, and I also highlight this aspect whenever I speak anywhere right now, is about responsible marketing, which is another new thing which is equally important as much as is the destination development. Because we were very conscious about what type of guests will actually arrive in our areas. And even if they're international or domestic, the reason is not being good or bad travelers, it's about choosing them to support the communities, and then there's not a big gap between expectations and realities. Again, I don't want to say that these holidays are roughed out experiences. We have built them on basic standards which are acceptable for both guests. So specific target audience from international as well as domestic, we have done through press releases. We have taken help from specific PR in outside India as well as from within India. We generally like to do direct sales. We are not doing anything outsourced, because when people connect with us and make a booking, we want to make sure that we convey what is exactly going to be there on ground and there is no gap. Therefore, we don't rely on any online medium for our bookings, where there is no connection between us and the actual guests who will be arriving. So keeping that in mind, I think we've had a successful result. I would say not in terms of the volumes which are generated, but more on the quality of travelers who have come, and that between the communities and the guests, there's never been a disconnect between their relationship, because finally it's the guest and the host which has to be together and have to learn from each other. It has to be a very respectable experience.
Right. Lokesh, how are you reaching out to international?
So I think the traveler is very aware these days. Every traveler comes with their own research. So they look at YouTube, they look at websites, they look at the internet very carefully before they decide on a destination. From our side, what we are looking for is the discerning traveler. So when we are looking for a discerning traveler, the best way of doing it is having at least 2 to 3 conversations, long conversations with the traveler who's coming all the way, and trying to determine what kind of experience they are looking for. So I think reaching out is not that much of an issue because people already know your brand, they look up your brand, they know the kind of work that you're doing, and only then they connect with you. So, but we need to ensure that we don't overpromise and we deliver whatever we set out to do. And I think that works really well for us. We are not looking for too many visitors at the moment.
Right. Mahesh, quick insight from you, and then we're almost out of time. So.
Sure, a combination of approaches. I would say one, of course, is, as we heard from Lokesh, building a strong online brand presence so that free individual travelers, what we know as FITs, can reach out to you from all over the world. People are very well aware with the widespread digital media these days. Then we had been partnering with fantastic people like Mr. Prabhat Verma in the room and other experts in handling different destination management companies. These kind of collaborations go a long, long way. And then inviting press, bloggers, especially if you're doing something innovative, which can be covered by either mainstream media or alternative forms of media, all of that helps.
Right. I know we have a couple of other questions. Let's take them offline because we are out of time right now. And I think this has been a very interesting discussion. And I'd like to thank my panelists for all the insights that they've given on responsible tourism in Uttarakhand. And I hope there are some learnings from this. And all of you in the room will go about and spread the word that we really need to balance what we're doing when it comes to tourism. Thank you so much.